So for 3D platformers, there's this concept called Coyote time, where you're able to jump even though you've left any given platform for a little window of time, just to make it seem like the controls are a little bit more responsive and a little bit more lenient. And that's what we're going to be making today. We're actually going to be doing two things. We're going to be doing that, and then we're also going to allow you to start jumping a little bit before you actually reach the ground, for similar reasons. You don't want people to miss out on inputs because they technically are just a little bit above the ground. So let's get started with that. As always, the finished project is linked down below in the description for supporters on either Patreon or for YouTube members. We're going to be using the third-person character for this. You do need this to be a character blueprint. A normal pawn with other custom movement is going to be a little bit more complex to implement this with. But if you're using a character, Unreal actually has a built-in function that can help us a lot with this. So in the character, under functions, we can override the canJump function. And for that, we're just going to make a variable. We can't call that canJump because there's going to be conflicting with names. So we'll call this something like allowJump instead. Compile real quick and set the default value to being true, because by default, we want to be able to jump. And this canJump is simply going to return. Built into the character movement, jumping, is a check for this canJump. So it's going to check whatever we provide into here, which is going to be our custom variable. And now whatever we do to set this custom variable is going to decide whether or not we can jump. Now the default implementation for canJump includes, are we at the moment falling? But we're going to be doing something a little bit more sophisticated than that. Because if we come down here, we can also add a on movement mode changed event, which is also a thing that comes with the character class. And here we can see what our new movement mode is. So if we do a equal enum and we set this to walking, whenever we movement mode to walking, that means that we're back on the ground. So we want to make sure that allow jump is going to be set to true so that we can jump again. So we just check for that first and foremost and allow jump being set to true. But if our new movement mode is not walking, but instead is falling, so let's get a check for the enum whether or not it is equal to falling. This is where we want to set allow jump to being false, but only after a certain amount of time. So let's put in a branch here as well. So if it is falling, what we'll do is we'll get our character movement component. We're going to get the velocity from that, because we only really want to do this if you're falling down. Because technically speaking, if you're jumping up, your movement mode still is going to be set to falling. But we want different behavior for whenever we start moving upwards, whenever we've just jumped. We only want this to affect things when we are moving downwards, when we're actually falling. So we're going to be splitting this structure pin, and we check whether or not our velocity is less than or equal to 0. Put in another branch, and here we can just put in a delay node. This is going to be the amount of time that your Coyote time window will last. I'm going to keep this at 0.2 seconds. You might want to make this a little bit shorter if you do want the input to require a little bit of a tighter response from your players. Or you might want to make this larger if you want to be particularly lenient about it. You could even make this a variable if your platformer game has difficulty settings, for instance. On easy mode, this might be half a second, and on like super hard mode, this might be 0. At the end of that delay, we're going to check this branch thing again, and we're going to be checking if we're still in the falling movement mode. Because what we don't want to do is start falling, then actually land, and then set our allow jump to false. So we'll check, hey, are we falling? Yes. Are we actually falling? So are we moving downward? Wait for a certain amount of time and then check, hey, are we still falling? So take this falling, put it into there. And if that is the case, we set allow jump to being false. Quickly cutting in here during the editing process, I noticed I made a tiny little mistake. After our delay, we don't want to check this is falling node again, because this is just checking our new movement mode from this event. What you actually want to do is you want to get your character movements, get movement mode, and you want to do a check on this. So I already have this node over here, get movement mode, and then we're checking, hey, is that still falling? Because this way we're actually checking the current movement mode of our character movement component, instead of rechecking the new movement mode, which obviously is always still going to be the same. Now this is effectively the implementation of a basic Coyote time. So if we go in here, we can just normally jump, as you would expect. But if I walk over the edge here, I can still jump for 0.2 seconds before I start falling down. But if I take too long, of course, cannot jump anymore. So that's basic Coyote time implemented, and it's really like as easy as that. But there's a slight little issue still, and that is as long as we're moving upward, we never get our jump set back to being full, so we can kind of fly. Now, if you just want Coyote time and not the other side of this, the solution to this is fairly easy. We just check, hey, if our character movement z velocity is not less than or equal to 0, we want to skip all of this and just immediately go into setting allowed jump to being false. That'll fix that for just simple Coyote time, as you can see. And the normal Coyote time will still work as you would expect it to. But I want to do this slightly differently because I want to implement the other feature that I talked about as well. And that's going to fix this issue in a slightly different way. For that, we're going to add in a tick event, and I'm going to just make a custom event real quick to add this code into, which will be check jump grace distance, and we'll do that in the tick event. So check jump grace distance, we'll do that every frame, and we'll just copy some stuff over from here. If our character movement z velocity is less than or equal to 0. That's what we'll copy over, but I'm actually going to change this to less than. So the difference is this also applies when you are just running along an actual surface, when you're on the ground. This will now only actually trigger if we're moving downwards actively. So if that is the case, that's the first check that we're going to do because we don't want to do anything after this unnecessarily. We will line trace by channel. And we're going to be tracing to get actor location as the start. And then the end will be get actor location minus 0, 0, and then a certain amount. So I'm going to set this to like 200 units. This again is just about how much grace you want to give your players. I think 200 units on a normal scale game is pretty good. And here we're just going to check, hey, did we hit anything? Because if we hit anything, that means that we're now within 200 units of whatever is below us, some kind of ground, which means that we can set the allow jumping to being true. This does come with the issue that we are going to be jumping while already in the movement mode for falling. So our new movement mode code that we have set up here, that's going to flip allow jump eventually to being false, isn't going to run because we didn't change the movement mode. We're still in the falling movement mode. So we need to do that manually here. And that is where I like to, in our check jump grace distance, somewhere in event tick, doesn't really matter where, I'm going to put in a quick little sequence here. We're first going to do all this, but then we'll do another branch in which we check our character movement if it is greater than 0. So this is just going to check, hey, are we currently moving upward? Because if we're moving upward, we never want to be able to jump like at all. Unless you have like some kind of double jump mechanic in your game, but just check for like your double jump counter as well here. So if we are moving up, we're just going to always set allow jump to being false, which that should now not allow us to infinitely jump, but as you can see, we can jump before actually reaching the ground. 200 units is fairly large of a distance to do that with, but this is a value that you can just kind of tweak to however you like. So we have Coyote time, and we have what I like to refer to as inverse Coyote time, which is the amount of time that you can jump before you should be able to jump, instead of the usual being able to jump after you shouldn't be able to jump anymore. And if you're making something like a platforming game, or any game with platforming mechanics for that matter, both of these I think are very important to implement. So if you want to support the channel, again, the links down below in the description, do that and you get access to the project files here, even though our setup here is fairly straightforward and fairly easy. It does help me create more of this type of content, so it's very much appreciated. And a very big thank you to all my Patreons. You can see them on screen right now. If you want to help support the channel or get any of the project files in any of my tutorials, there's a link down below to the Patreon page to support me, or alternatively as a YouTube member. And of course, an extra massive thank you to my Cave Digger tier supporters, Sir J. Thomas, and my Cave Student tier supporters, Oiku and Earl Monsville Urno.